Hey y'all, I hope you're enjoying my cooking with tofu guide, and I've tried at least one of the recipes so far. I'm going to address some of the more difficult aspects of the guide, such as the longer recipes having more complex steps, and the general quirkiness of the guide as well. For those of you who are inexperienced with cooking or have no experience whatsoever, like I said, I'm going to cover the more difficult steps, that way you get a better idea of what you should be doing when cooking those meals. And for those of you who are more experienced, I'm going to cover substitutions of utensils and ingredients, that way you can modify the meal to taste exactly the way you want it to. For the spicy noodle soup with tofu, if you don't have a large enough food processor, that can become a minor problem when transferring the ingredients for the broth to a food processor, since you'll need to make two trips, and that would require a second stockpot to hold the liquid broth in. And if your food processor is too small, that means you have to have your countertop completely uncluttered and uncrowded from anything that's not required for preparing the spicy noodle soup with tofu. For the loaded crispy tofu tacos, when you're pan frying the tofu, it can be very dangerous because the oil will spatter onto your hands and burn you. And to prevent this, you'll want to use tongs, that way you're farther distant away from the pan, which will lower the chances of you being burned. And for making the sauce, I used the Magic Bullet smoothie maker because I think the actual smoothie maker itself is a perfect container to serve the sauce out of. However, a standard food processor works exactly the same, it's just a different shape of the container. For the crispy vegetable tofu dumplings, you have to make certain that you are greasing the containers for it with the oil that you're going to use, like olive oil or general vegetable oil, because the tofu dumplings have a very big problem of becoming stuck to the container they're in if the containers aren't properly greased. Like in the picture on the right, that's what my tofu dumplings ended up looking like after I steamed them, except they're totally stuck together and stuck to the steaming basket, and so they fell apart when I tried to get them out, which is bad. And to continue on the crispy vegetable tofu dumplings, when you're actually preparing the dumplings themselves, like putting them together, it's important to get just under 2 teaspoons, but that's really difficult because just under 2 teaspoons is not something you can eyeball from the mixture on the right, which is what the filling looks like when you're done cooking it. And so it will take a lot of trial and error to get the amount perfectly right. Because if you overfill it, no amount of egg white glue will save the dumpling from falling apart. For the slow cooker tofu tikka masala, it's a very simple recipe, but if you want to make it more personal and more interesting, you can make your own garam masala spice. But I don't recommend doing that unless you're very experienced in cooking and making spices, in which case I recommend you picking up garam masala at your local grocery store. And the picture on the right is what the container looks like at the local grocery store, and you can find it on the spice aisle. For the crispy tofu bowl, I actually recommend you going off book for this and experimenting around with the recipes. For example, substituting in bell peppers for the cucumbers or couscous for the quinoa. For example, I actually just took out all of the cucumber in my tofu bowl recipe when I made it myself because I just don't like cucumber, and instead I added in tomatoes, and that's a picture of the tomato I used when cooking it. And you could even prepare the tofu in a different way if you'd like to, by stir frying it or steaming it if you wish. I hope this presentation has helped clear up some of the more difficult aspects when preparing these meals, and has also encouraged you to try and experiment with some of the easier meals, like the crispy tofu bowl I mentioned, or going ahead and making your own garam masala spice. And I hope that you continue to enjoy using the cooking with tofu guide I prepared. Thank you.